welcome to Bury Our Bones with Cinema, the podcast that lives, breathes and dies classic movies, not so classic movies and everything in between. Joining me once again in the podcast booth is the Shawn Michaels to my Bret Hart, the wonderful Mr. Simon Keet. In today's episode, we turn up the heat with 2007's Southland Tales. So join us as we watch two 4x4s do the bad thing, spend far too much time trying to blow up a blimp, and finally wonder what is going on with Timberlake's goatee. This podcast contains spoilers. So I don't really know where we're going to start with this film because, well, I'll tell you where I will start. First of all, choosing to watch this film at about 11 o'clock on a Saturday night was the worst decision I could have made because there is a lot going on in this film and I don't understand 70% of it. And I like films where you go, oh, that's a bit questionable. Oh, what's going on here? I usually like that type of film. But here, I found myself probably about half an hour in going, oh, there can't be too much left of this film. But then looking at the runtime and there's another hour and 45 minutes left. As I say, worst decision I ever made was to watch this at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night.
Did you watch it Saturday just gone?
Saturday just gone, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I watched this last night and then I had to watch it properly the sort of this afternoon. And it's one of those things where I guess I should say where I sort of stand in it. I'd never even heard of this. And when you showed me the case of it, I was like, The Rock? Sarah Michelle Gellar? I was like quite up for whatever was going to happen. And I started watching it last night. I was like, oh, this is rubbish. And then I started watching it this afternoon. I was like, oh, and Christina said, are you enjoying it or whatever? I said, oh, it's rubbish, but I was like, watching it. And then I was like, actually, I like it. Like, I don't know if it's because it just sort of got really good at the end or it all started to line up a bit more or when it all started wrapping up. And I actually I think this has rewatch value. Quite a lot of it.
I think it does have rewatch value, but you have to be prepared to rewatch it. And I know that sounds ridiculous to say because it's kind of a bit of an oxymoron, but you have to you have to sort of obviously set aside time to watch it because it's a long ass film, but also just be in the right headspace to watch it because I mean, where I stand on this is for a film that has a lot of stuff I like, I don't think I've ever disliked a film as much. Like, again, sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, but there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm going, that objectively, that's great. That's really good. And then the next scene happens and I'm like, oh, and now we're back to the shit. You know, it's just such a weird film. I mean, it's so strange that I still don't quite know what to make of it after watching it and then watching some making ofs.
I should just say this as well, is, because this is one of those Arrow not remaster, what would you call them?
So it's one of the Arrow video releases, which is anybody who's been following us on social media, particularly our TikTok account, will know that I'm a big advocate for because they are just stupendously amazing value for money. This Blu-ray, which we both have, was a £5, and you've obviously got the film. You've got two versions of the film. You've got 3 making of featurettes. You've got the audio commentary. You've got some some still images that you can view on in Blu-ray. Just there's so much content for a £5, and obviously in other content as well. Their 4K releases are great. So that's me waxing over Arrow Video, but
because Arrow Video are good. When I'd press play, and I was a bit sleepy last night, so I pressed play on it, and then the sort of intro sequence started playing and I went to press play again. I couldn't do nothing because I thought I was on the menu. Like when it's going through all of the...
It does look like a DVD menu, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I was like, oh, this is really good, this DVD. And I was like, hold on a minute. I've already come off the menu. This is the movie. And I was like, I should be paying attention.
There's that slight nostalgic feel when you go, oh, DVD menus of the mid-noughties were great.
Yeah.
And, we don't really get that anymore. But I know exactly what you mean. It's
when it's showing you all of the backstory, because there's a lot of stuff that's already happened before the movie starts.
When you say backstory, I feel like it should be in inverted commas, because I made some. I don't usually make notes on my first viewing, but I got like 20 minutes in and was like, I'm going to have to make some notes here, because otherwise, if I don't manage to watch it again before we record, I'm going to need some notes, because there's so much going on here. And one of the first things I said was the first 20 minutes tries to explain a lot of stuff, but somehow manages to explain nothing at the same time. And I can't work out if the film is incoherent because it throws too much information out there, or if it's incoherent because it doesn't throw enough information out there. And after watching the rest of the film, I'm still none the wiser.
It's a film made for people to eat some magic mushrooms first and sit through, I think. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, that would be a mind-blown moment.
Yeah, because I think it would all make sense then. I have a feeling with this movie that I struggle to diss something that it feels like it's come from a good place. Like, it feels like he was trying to make something quite grandiose and good. And I think I'm definitely happy to say it maybe didn't stick the landing, but I've not actually seen anything quite like it. And I'm really fascinated by it.
It is a film that is like, and it's such a cliche to say, but there is nothing else like this film that I can really think of. Like, it has elements where you go, oh, that's a little bit this, that's a little bit that. But generally speaking, this film is totally unique. And that I don't necessarily see that as a good thing, because I think it needs to kind of define what it is. Because, as I said before, there's a lot in here that I like, but it all feels like stuff. It feels like they just had a collection of scenes and they just put them together with no like real kind of thought or process, which obviously is not the case. But having watched a lot of the extras on the Blu-ray, you find out that it was supposed to be a lot more grandiose than what it is. So if you feel like it's grandiose now, it's like, how much more grandiose could it get? But apparently there was supposed to be graphic novel prequels. There's supposed to be a whole like series of other graphic novels coming afterwards. And like, it was supposed to be like this whole massive universe. And you can kind of see that being the case, because it does kind of feel like a collection of different stories just kind of amalgamated together. But usually you have like a through line or a link that kind of keeps them all coherent. And usually that would be the narrator here. But the narrator, played by Justin Timberlake, is not only one of the weirdest castings in the world, but for a film with a narrator, the narrator offers virtually nothing. I don't think.
He's quite good though. And if they'd made toys of the Southland Tales when I was a kid, like, he would have been a good toy, because he'd come with a mounted sniper rifle that you could spin around and you could just stick him anywhere.
I just don't. I literally, like, as we talk about this, I'm going through my mind, what is this film? Like, I just cannot put my finger on.
Why don't we start with some of the characters? You know, like some of their main storylines.
That is probably the best place to start. I could go through the plot, but I don't think that will help anybody. So we obviously have Dwayne Johnson, otherwise known as The Rock, as Boxer Santeros / Jericho Kane. We have Sarah Michelle Gellar as Krista Now. We have Sean William Scott as Roland and Ronald Taverna. You have Justin Timberlake as Private Pilot Abilene, who is the narrator.
He's my favourite in this, I have to say.
I do like him. I do like him, but I also hate him. I feel like this is the film where, as I say, I like a lot of it, but I hate a lot of it as well.
I think, just to quickly, I think the performances are good, though. Do you think, like, I think they're all really on board with it. You know, like it doesn't feel like anyone's looking around going, "What is this?" I feel like they're all very on board with it.
Usually you get at least one actor who's in it who is just clearly there for the payday and clearly going, I'm just going to have fun here and I don't care what happens. Whereas here, it does, like, I think one of my notes said, how did they get so many people to get on board with this? Because how do you pitch this to somebody? Like, it's not an easy pitch.
I think you make Donnie Darko and then everyone loves you. Is that what happened?
Well, this was made sort of. I think he said he was writing this just after Donnie Darko was made, but it hadn't been released, and he was pitching it around, and nobody was picking it up. Donnie Darko was a bit of a flop, but then was released on DVD and gained like cult status. And I feel like this is a film where if you've obviously watched Donnie Darko, you would have gone in going, "Oh yes, it's the guy who done Danny Darko."
Danny Dyer Darko.
Danny Dyer is Donnie Darko.
Which way do I go?
Yeah.
What's that bloody rabbit doing?
You slag. Where's that bloody bunny? That may be. I want to hear that in a film 100%. Yeah, this would be the film that people would go, "Oh, it's by the same dude who done Donnie Darko. I feel like this is going to be great." And I feel like, well, it obviously did derail this guy's career, like in terms of directing. I think the only other film really of any kind of real acclaim, if you can call it that, is The Box in 2009, which is another kind of sci-fi what's going on type film. And as I say, Donnie Darko compared to this is that the right side of that what's going on, what am I supposed to be questioning here? It's the right side of that where you've got a lot of questions and you don't necessarily get all of the answers, but that's okay. Whereas here, I feel like there's so many questions, there's so much stuff flying out at you that it's really, really difficult to just get a handle on actually what's going on. And that is the film's biggest detriment, is that you can go like a 5-minute period where you go, okay, this is actually all right for a bit. And then all of a sudden something happens and you're like, what has just happened? What are we watching now? What is going on? You know, like there's some I think that the comedy in this, more than anything, is really funny.
Yeah,
like
good.
I was surprised at how funny this film was. And I feel like, as much as I like the soundtrack, so there's a song by Moby, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like the theme of Southland Tales. But it makes it feel like this film thinks it's like a lot more intelligent than it is. Like it makes it feel like there's all these, you know, this big sort of, well, I suppose it is grandiose, but it kind of fits the film, but all the comedy alongside it makes it feel really disjointed.
Can I read you this Reddit comment that sort of summed up the movie? I thought it was quite. Can I read you this?
Go for it.
The first time I watched this movie, the first time I watched it alone, but then immediately made my roommates watch it with me again because I was like, this movie perfectly captures what it's like to be in a dream. Like there is a plot, but it's so wacky and nonsensical. Things then happen linearly, but also don't really fit together. By the end of it, it tells a story, but does that story make any coherent sense outside the context of the film? Absolutely not. Just like when you tried to make sense of a dream after you've woken up. Of course, I now know Richard Kelly did not intend for it to be like that at all. But they liked it, basically. They said, first of all, I also really like this movie unironically. And they said it, and I like what they said. It's like, you have a dream, and it all makes sense in dream world, and then you wake up, and you're like, I can't make sense of that dream, but it made sense in there. And I don't know how that's done. I can't think of any other films like this. And I guess it's that thing of like, do films have to be, does the director have to achieve their goal, or can it just be good for other reasons? Because, like Flash Gordon, I think the director probably expected people to take it a bit differently. Now everyone loves it as a campy, rompy sci-fi, but I don't necessarily know if that was the
I don't know if that's the film he went out to make, was it?
It still came out in a certain way. And there's something... I think it's all done quite well. Like the sort of epic scenes towards the end are really cool. When my favourite whole sequence of this is when the ice cream truck like flies up and then he shoots an RPG at the mega Zeppelin.
That feels very Saints Row, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It feels like you can imagine it like a character in it with a really bad Cockney accent. You can imagine that. But and I think that's what I kind of find with this film is that it feels like a load of episodes of an anthology TV show that all has like a bit like a Black Mirror type thing. Feels like if you were to just watch the scenes in like the US ident area, that would be an episode. If you were to all watch the scenes where it's on Venice Beach in California, that would all be an episode. If you were all, to watch all of the scenes with Sean William Scott and that kind of weird heisty thing that's going on, or that whole blackmail situation, that would be an episode. And it feels like everything was kind of just bunched together, and I don't know if it was, well, he kind of intended it to be like that, but I feel like the fact that he's done graphic novels as like prequels to this, and that was the idea of it being like a massive universe. I can totally get that sense, because everything feels ironically unfinished. And the reason I say ironically is because I think one of the extras is called The Insides of an Unfinished Film, because it feels very much like they're almost onto something. It's almost there. It's almost there. It's just, it needs a bit.
Yeah, but do you ever listen to music? Like, some of my favourite music is like, one of my favourite albums is Nebraska by Bruce Springsteen. He just released his demos. He just put his demos out, and to be fair, it's much more fully formed than this movie still. But do you reckon this is just a demo tape? I think he said as well that his idea would be to come back to it. Because after the Ken's film showing thing, it didn't get a great response. I think that's being nice, and then they shaved off quite a lot of it. So I actually
properly
to
bombed,
be honest,
didn't
Ryan,
it?
I did watch the theatrical release, which was the one they shaved a bit of time off. So you might be coming from this watching the Ken's one, which might have even, because you watched a longer one, I think.
Yeah, so the one I watched was 2 hours and 24
So maybe
minutes.
that's why I have a slightly different. You can never know.
Maybe,
that might have affected how we feel about it. And
it was, yeah,
but still, it's still quite similar, isn't it? Surely.
Yeah, and I think he wanted it to be even longer. For straight away, he was always being asked to cut time off. So I think at one point he's like, nobody wants to make a 3-hour film. Nobody wants to make a 2-hour film. And this is, well, the version I watched was just under 2.5 hours. And it was 2.5 hours of just me. And it doesn't feel like it was an intentional choice. Where, you watch Donnie Darko and you're going, what is going on here? And that's kind of the point of the film. And actually, that's what makes it good. Whereas here, I'm going, what's going on here? And it doesn't seem to be the intention of the film, and doesn't add anything to the film. As I say, there are scenes in here that are really, really funny. The scene with the girl with dreads who is in Scary Movie. And Christopher Lambert in an ice cream truck doing a gun deal, and she kicks the shit out of him. Objectively and in isolation, it's really funny. The scene, there's a really great line with Deep Throat 2 and like her lackey, where she's like, how the hell is anybody supposed to blackmail somebody when you can't get their representation on the phone? And then she says something else, and then her lackey's like, fuck yeah. Like, that's really funny, but it just feels like it's like every time I get on board with it, something happens and takes me completely out of it again.
It's like the plot really has
or lack thereof.
Yeah, but the story really has an effect on the movie we see, like the time, like the way it manipulates time and that, like with the karma, what's it called? Fluid karma. Like, I feel like that whole thing is all over this film, and that's what confuses me the most, I think. With The Rock as Jericho Kane, or his other name is
Boxer Santeros, which again sounds like a Saints Row character.
Yeah, he wakes up of amnesia, and so he was working. He was sort of high up as was he like a senator or something? I'm sorry.
He's married to the senator's daughter.
Yeah, so he's part of the system, but then he wakes up of amnesia, and I like that. That's why he wakes up with amnesia in the desert, and he's writing a script. He has this, intuitive. He wants to make this amazing screenplay. It's going to save the world or change the world or something. And then for some reason, Buffy, Sarah Michelle Gellar as Kristen Now is really like wants to help him do it and stuff. And so where that all comes to an end, that sort of goes on throughout the movie. But where that comes to an end is you end up with Boxer sort of finding out that they used him to. Oh God, this is hard, Ryan. This is really hard. I don't know.
Right, you're saying words, and I'm going. I'm none the wiser. So we've both seen the film.
He's driving they use him in there, I guess, like an experiment to send him through to the fourth dimension or something.
Something like that.
And then his old self dies, and his new self survives. So, and he's like, I'm my new self, and he's got this thing where he keeps like tapping.
Essentially. Kind of what we see with Sean William Scott's characters is kind of what's already happened in some way with The Rock's characters.
Well, he was driving him. That's the reveal. Sean William Scott, I think, was driving him. But Sean William Scott, for whatever reason, both selves live.
Yeah.
And they're sort of separated. There's a really cool scene though, Ron. You got to admit. I know you like the scenes, but like I'm thinking of it now. Where he's looking in the mirror and it's delayed.
It's a cool scene,
yeah,
and I like it. But what the fuck is going on? Like
that's the whole film.
Like at no point, or if it has, I've obviously missed it. But I don't think I have missed it. At no point does it explain what the fuck's going on there. Like. Okay, he's got a delayed reaction. Why? What is that? What? I
think because he's been split into two versions of himself. But then, shall I just give you the reason why this movie sort of touched me? The reason why I ended up having to sort of go, God, I think I like it. It's just the last. It all like so. I hope whoever's watching it has seen this, because major spoilers at this point. I know we always say that, but please watch it before I'm about to say this. But my theory is that it's so nonsensical and it's hard to sort of all piece it together in my head, and it is like trying to work out a dream. But I think that Sean William Scott's character, and what's his name, right?
Roland and Ronald.
Yeah, what's his second name?
Taverner.
So that when they touch, it's sort of, the whole film leads to these two touching, and it's going to send a rift in the space-time continuum, potentially end the world or whatever. But when they do that, the whole point of the whole movie is that he killed his best mate, who is Justin Timberlake, in Iraq, I think. He blew him up by throwing a grenade, and it blew him up, which is said right at the beginning of the movie. And right at the end, what he's doing when he's speaking to his double is he's forgiven himself. And it's all this like symbology, symbolism of like, religious stuff of like the sacrifice and the forgiveness being, it almost is saying like when he forgives himself for killing his friend and they touch each other, it's like that's the only thing that can stop this perpetual cycle of violence and delusion and craziness. Like the most important thing is forgiveness. And then it's like, well, God, that message is somehow in this movie, and it took all that nonsensical plot to get there. But how most films normally get there, and much less powerful, is just like, you got to forgive, man. Yeah, I'm over it. You know what I mean? It's like, or you shoot the guy at the end.
And I think that's I think one of the big problems with it is it tries, or I will give the people who made the film the benefit of the doubt. Although when I did watch the extras, the way they spoke about it was like there was no sense that they knew that what they made was not very good. Like the way they speak about it was like, it's particularly like the producer. He says the way Richard writes, it's like, I really admire him because he doesn't cut anything. He just kind of goes, well, let's rework it into something else, and that's a really admirable thing to do. And it's like at no point does anybody like take a step back and go, in retrospect, we probably should have cut a lot of this stuff out and actually come up with a better way of getting from one scene to the other. And actually it's like it's all, and nobody's being like arrogant or anything like that with it, but it's like obviously they have their own vision, and it's like they can't see anything but their end vision, that their end, what they wanted to create, and what they've ended up creating just isn't that. And what I was trying to say is its biggest problem is it thinks it's more than it is. Like, I feel like there's all this window dressing going on, and as you've just kind of said, something I didn't really pick up on because of all the window dressing is it's a story about him forgiving himself because he killed his friend, and
or at least for that character.
And that was lost on me because of all the other shit going on. Now, if you'd have focused on that and made that like the anchor and the thing that carries you throughout the movie, and it's about him, that would have been, I think, a better movie, and it would have been at least a lot more coherent.
You're like this as well, Ryan. The reason I think they cast The Rock as that character is because he's wrestling with himself, and that's why he's called Jericho Kane. I have this feeling, this sort of theory that I think that he is this character who's like, he was obviously part of the system, and now he's sort of got amnesia, forgotten about that, and he's having to wrestle with like who he is, and he's part of the military industrial complex, but he's also what to be fair, all that deep stuff aside, there's a scene on the beach where there's a woman saying, I want to suck your dick, and then he says, he goes, I'll make that happen for you, go there, she gets shot. It's bonkers, isn't it? Like, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I for me felt like there was.
I don't think you can read too much into that. She says, "If you don't let me suck your dick, I'm going to kill myself." Like, that's.
Yeah, but he says here, "Make it happen," and then she goes to kill it. She goes to shoot him, and then he's shot by Justin Timberlake, who at that point is. I think he's already been killed by a. I think that's the movie starts off like that. This guy has been killed in the war by a grenade. It was friendly fire, and that was Sean William Scott's character who did it before he split into two. But it's this thing when you mess around with time. To be honest, though, time dilation movies, all Back to the Future, all these movies, they'll have massive plot holes in. Whereas this one. It doesn't actually try to cover that. It sort of is just fucked up because it's like if you mess with time. Maybe I don't want to be devil's advocate for this movie, but just say that's one cool thing about this movie, I guess. It messes with time and the film's fucked.
That is a pretty accurate statement to make.
Imagine watching Back to the Future if they'd really messed around with time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be even weird.
Yeah, it's just so off the wall here in this film, and I just can't get past like how much I can, like, ironically you said you think they cast The Rock because he's wrestling with himself. I'm wrestling with myself with this film because I can't work out if I love it or hate it. Yeah. And that's so weird. Like, usually I have very clear defined kind of views on films. It's very, I either hate it, I love it, or it's kind of like, okay, yeah, it's all right. I have very clear views on it. But here I'm like, there is so much genuinely funny stuff in this film. There's some really kind of like nice shots, and it's shot nicely, it's well made. But the narrative is just so incoherent that it just, as you say, it just bleeds into everything where you can't really get past it at any point.
It would have been nice if there were less characters in it. Like it
And
feels
yeah,
like there's an awful lot of characters in it, and not on, you know, like Christopher Lambert, he's a strong one in it, and he's maybe doesn't get enough screen time, whereas some of the others do, and they're a
well,
bit,
it's
they
just
seem a bit
crazy
less.
that you've got these people who are like, it's essentially a cameo from Christopher Lambert. It's essentially a cameo for John Lovitz. It's essentially a cameo for Kevin Smith, who is the guy at the end in the wheelchair thing, who's made up. That's Kevin Smith. Because I was like, I recognise the guy's voice, but I don't recognise who he looked. And I was like, oh, it's Kevin Smith. And it's like,
I missed that.
they've got all of these great performers in their own right and doing their own thing. And it's not that they don't utilise them. It's just more like they utilise all of them,
They definitely.
if you know what I mean.
You know, that's the talking video games. People don't like the new Tekken 8 very much. I mean, people like it, but they don't like the new Tekken 8 very much. And it's not because thing with fighting games quickly is that they have like a meta of characters. Like there's like top ones that are better than other ones. So you may as well, if you're playing online, you may as well not play as certain characters because they don't compete well. And then you end up with a competition, and then people are playing like 5-6 characters or something, and then they switch that every time with an update. So like the best characters change. But in Tekken 8, every single character now is overpowered. So the game is bonkers. You play it and when every character is brokenly good, like overpowered, the game becomes frantic, furious, and you play it and afterwards you need to go lay down. Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of, this is it feels like that.
Yeah, and it's almost like, just on that analogy, that they made it thinking or with the intent of, we're going to solve that problem. And then they solved the problem and then realised, oh, there's a reason that problem exists, because if you don't have that problem, this is what ends up happening, whereby it's too much. You do kind of need those bits where actually you do need to have, a general kind of plot running throughout a whole film. You do kind of need to make sure that all the scenes link together. You do kind of need to make sure that every character is kind of affecting the story. And this just kind of doesn't have that. And it's a strange one, because I went into this episode thinking I was going to say how much I hate it. But now that I'm talking about it more, I'm now on the fence. And it's such a weird position to be thinking, oh, I can't wait to talk to Simon about how much I hate this film. And then as soon as we start talking, I'm going, I love this film in some ways.
Yeah. The thing is as well, there's some rewatch value, like Justin Timberlake singing I got soul but I'm not a soldier.
That was the point where I was like, oh, I don't think this film is going to get to where I want it to go.
And I think for me it started off, I'm like, whoa, okay, why have I not heard about this before? Very RoboCop, but lots of cool cutaways, like maybe a little bit too much lore at the beginning, explaining like everything that's happened before. But Lord of the Rings did it for a little while. We're not on a DVD menu screen. By the way, it doesn't let up with like the world building as it goes on. There's constant TV screens on throughout the whole movie.
I feel like it needs. The point I made is that, and it's weird that we keep linking it back to video games, but the social commentary and satire isn't at the level of, say, Grand Theft Auto, whereby when you listen to the radio on your drive to the next mission in GTA, there's some really great social commentary that is funny, but also has a general point. And here, they're funny, but they seem to be lacking that point in some places, in a lot of it. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like the whole point of having these kind of RoboCop-esque, dystopian look at the future. I mean, it has ironically kind of predicted certain things that have actually ended up happening, but it's more the thing of going, well, that it feels like it's just been put in there because that's something cool or that's something funny. And it doesn't feel, as I say, much like everything with this film, it doesn't feel like it's been put in there for a reason. Like it just feels like the fact that one of the characters is just on rollerblades.
It's sort of RoboCop very clearly shows you the world you're in. Like you straight away, you get a few of those sort of things on the news and you're like, well, I kind of totally understand this, whereas this film shows you loads of stuff and you're like, I'm not quite sure what the world is very confusing. Like, it's like, if anything, it just seems like the world is very bonkers and it feels video gaming.
The biggest difference is that RoboCop knows when to stop world building. Here, it just keeps doing it. It keeps doing it and keeps doing it and keeps doing it, even to the point where you're at the end of the film and it keeps world building, keeps building this world that you're in. And I'm like, but we're nearly at the end. I need to know the world I'm in. And I feel like I don't know the world I'm in because you're still giving me stuff that tells me about this world. And it, when I'm not able to connect with any of the characters because I don't know the world that they're in, because you're still feeding me bits of information and bits and bobs. And I feel like it does make sense hearing Richard Kelly talk about it and go, I wanted this to be part of like a 9-hour like anthology thing, or, I wanted there to be a lot more content, because it does feel like, a very long opening act.
Yeah, to be fair, I started to like this film halfway through, if I'm honest, like, and that's quite a weird thing to slowly. So, there could have been another day where if I wasn't watching it for this, I might have just turned it off. I was like, I didn't really get into that. I might just be like, this is a waste of time, because I do that with stuff on Netflix now. Do you know what I mean? If it's like rubbish, I'll just turn it off. But this, I probably would turn. Actually, with the cast, would I turn it off? I obviously love Sarah Michelle Gellar from Buffy and stuff. Some of the things don't line up for me. Like, they're in a surveillance state. They've got like people sniper towers all around and that, but they can't find Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, he's not exactly inconspicuous, is he?
Yeah, and
he's 6'4", and it's Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Is there? I think. But what I like about this movie is the fact that I do think the performances are good. Like, I do think I really like him in this, and I like him right at the end. I love the dance scene with him and Sarah Michelle Gellar at the end, and then the other.
There is something really kind of sort of beautiful about that.
Yeah, it was done really good.
And that's where I think I still have some trouble, is that we've got all of this comedy and all of this thing, and then it really quickly shifts into this, this really kind of like or supposed to be really emotional kind of scene, and then that Moby music kind of comes in over the top, and it's like, but at no point has this film been that before.
No.
And it's like, I understand having that shift, but I need to know why that shift is happening. And because of everything else before it, there's too much going on here. There's just so much shit thrown against the wall. There's a really random like cameo from Eli Roth who gets shot on a toilet. And that's the thing that I found really distracting as well. Like, I keep noticing, that's Christopher Lambert. Oh, that's Kevin Smith.
Yeah,
that's Eli Roth. It's really really kind of distracting.
Here's a bit of a comparison analogy. I'm not sure, but the other day there was a reel pop up, and it was Orlando Bloom talking about Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings spoiler here now. Not that you're about 70, 100. How many years is that written? But you're a bit too late. But anyway, Gandalf dies, but he gets resurrected. He comes back as Gandalf the White. But when he dies to the Balrog, the bit afterwards, so they're reacting to his death. Legless, Orlando Bloom, he done a commentary of how he acted that scene. He was like, and he sort of goes, so he's talking, he's talking about that scene where Gandalf has just died, and he goes, well, I wanted my reaction to be like totally, like confused, dismayed, like, it's the first time Legolas has ever dealt with death, because elves are immortal. Do you know what I mean? They never die. So he's not ever been around death before. And I was like, and then you see his face, how he acted it. He's all confused. It really works for the scene. But all the comments are saying, I don't think that's why Legolas was confused. Like, the elves have been in wars and stuff. Like, he would have seen death. Like, I don't even know if elves are immortal, but Gandalf kind of is. But basically, he showed his working out on the test paper. It was wrong, but he got the right answer. Yeah. I feel like this movie,
he got a mark for the right answer, but not for the working out.
Yeah, I feel like this movie has the right answers, but it's done some weird working out. And then it's like, does that make Legolas's role in that movie any worse? I don't think it does.
No.
Does it make this movie any worse? I'm not sure, because it still come out with the really good, an ice cream van like going into the sky. a guy who also looks like Kevin Smith, but Kevin Smith is he looks like a younger Kevin Smith.
Yeah.
The
Guy who ends up standing on the floating ice cream machine.
Yeah, this whole story about the sacrifice of that he has to die. This the Rock character, and then this other guy like having this forgiveness story. The RPG that we saw earlier with Christopher Lambert used to blow up a mega zeppelin, which I like the mega zeppelin. That's very sci-fi to me. Like I want to, that's cool.
Yeah, that's straight out of Philip K. Dick, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know, but.
Well, I mean, Philip K. Dick is a well-known sort of sci-fi short story writer, and it's that kind of thing. Blade Runner is based on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Nice.
And Blade Runner is very in that same realm of massive zeppelins.
And this is, so yeah, I guess it got the good answers, and I was there for him at the end. But I did have to sit for a long movie to get there.
I think it's clear that, he mentions it in his kind of influences. Obviously, this is kind of directly kind of affected by a post 9/11 kind of world, and it comes across, quite clearly that this was made after that, because of some of the the themes and the rhetoric that's kind of there. And I think it is important to kind of realise that not only because obviously the narrative and the story and the actual film itself is hugely responsible for why it flopped, but there are other contributing factors as well. So there's two really. The first is this was kind of released kind of right at the start of the writers' strike in 2006, I think 2007. So they weren't able to promote it at all. So apparently they had The Rock and everybody was due to go on Letterman and Jay Leno and all of the late night shows, and they weren't able to because of the writers' strike. And I feel like this is a movie that needs to be promoted. It's not a movie that you can kind of go, I don't think anybody's going to look at this really and go, oh, that looks all right, should we put that on? You get movies like that, but you get movies like this, which kind of, I need to know what it is before I go into it.
Yeah.
I need to know, because I think if you went into this not knowing what it was, I think you'd come out of it not knowing what it was either, but it's a film that needs to be promoted. And just as we've got on screen, because I do want to mention, they've got Zelda Rubinstein in this, who is the smaller woman who speaks to Boxer Santeros about his script, and she was in Poltergeist. Okay. And she is a fantastic actress, but she plays a very similar role here to what she plays in Poltergeist. And go and listen to our episode on that. And she is really, really funny here. There's the scene where she's basically in the library.
It's the Small World bookshop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Small World bookshop. And she's got his screenplay, Boxer Santeros' screenplay. And he goes, how have you got my screenplay? And then he goes to snatch it from her. And just a little kind of interplay between them two is just brilliant. It's just proper, I love Zelda Rubinstein. She's fantastic in pretty much everything I've seen her in. So I did want to mention that. But going back to what I was saying about reasons it flopped, another massive reason is that obviously now we're watching it in 2025. The names that are in here are kind of proven names. But in 2006, The Rock was obviously massive in wrestling. But in movies, he wasn't.
Oh, yeah.
In movies, he was still in that period of trying to find out what he is as a movie star. I think all he really made that was successful was The Scorpion King. It's the only thing that was really successful. And arguably, certainly in terms of box office, it was successful. But in terms of critical acclaim, that's up for debate. He'd been in films like Walking Tall, and I think The Game Plan and Gridiron Gang were all around this sort of time. And so it's not The Rock of 2015 or 2025 where he's almost a bankable proven movie star, whereby you put his name on the billboard and it sells itself. He's not that here. And I think because of that, his performance is much better because of it, because he's not trying to be The Rock as the movie star. He's trying to still find his feet. And because he's trying to find his feet, he's a bit more experimental with it.
I would say that he's really, he's
not, he's not The Rock. He's not The Rock who is in all the Fast and Furious films or in pretty much every film. He's not standing there trying to look like a movie star. He's kind of acting the scene, and
I think he really good. Like it does give me vibes of Total Recall. I mean, this film is a bit Total Recall anyway in a way, but it gives me his presence in this is very. If you put Arnold Schwarzenegger in it, I don't know if it would come up with that much of a different thing. I think he just really commits to the sort of character of this sort of stiff guy who was, part of the establishment, and now he's got amnesia. And when it started, and it was like, oh, he's got amnesia, and he's writing this screenplay. I was like, what the hell? Like, I was really trying to get I was like, he's writing a screenplay.
Yeah, why is that your first thing? Because he's only just woken up from this amnesia, and the first thing he goes is, I'm going to write a screenplay. Not trying to work out why I've got amnesia, what's happened before.
Also, Sarah Michelle Gellar outside of Buffy, I've not really seen much apart from that horror movie.
The Grudge?
Is it The Grudge?
The Grudge, yeah.
And in this, she is playing a porn star.
Well, I presume you mean The Grudge. She's been in a few horror films.
Okay, fair.
What?
I don't know.
Give me the context of the horror film.
Oh, I can't remember.
Well, The Grudge is...
I've seen The Grudge. So it might have been that one.
Yeah, it might also be I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh, I've also seen that.
Yeah.
So I've seen.
Is it a slasher movie? Or is it? Yeah.
A slasher.
So it's I Know What You Did Last Summer, most probably.
So, she is very. She's, I don't know, but she's quite Sarah Michelle Gellar in most things.
You know what you're getting with her, and that that's not, for me anyway. That's not criticism.
So in this, she went full on Joss Whedon. She was playing her robot when Spike makes a robot Buffy in the Buffy, and she's like just loves Spike. Or there's some other scenes where she like goes all silly, and she's like Buffy, silly Buffy, and it's like in this she's silly Buffy the whole film.
And
I quite like it.
And I think going back to what I was saying about this is 2006 Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I think, just as a general kind of point, this is a really weird collection of people to have in a movie. Like, it's almost like the start of a joke. Like, you've got Sarah Michelle Gellar, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, and Sean William Scott walk into a bar.
Yeah.
It feels like that. And I think a lot of audiences at the time were like, what the fuck is going on there? Like, where's your star? Where's your, I think it was certainly at that time, I think it was a really weird cast. Like, there wasn't anybody, like, usually, for example, out of those three, if you have three main characters, you've got kind of usually clearly defined roles. And it's weird because what's odd about it is you usually have the wacky one, you usually have the straight-laced one, and you usually have, like, the muscle. And what's weird here is you don't have those clearly defined roles, or at least not in the way that you'd expect. So you'd expect The Rock to be the muscle, but he's kind of a bit of a wimp and a bit of a drab. Like, he's not in there like kicking the shit out of everyone and saving the day. He's like this bumbling kind of like goofy guy. And I think kind of that's the point, is you look at Dwayne The Rock Johnson and you expect that. So when it's goofy, it's quite jarring and he's quite funny. So there's that element to it. You've got Sean William Scott, who at this point is very well known for being Stifler in American Pie.
Very serious in this.
And in here, it's like everything you feel like you want to get from Sean William Scott, or at least why you would cast him at that time in the audience's mind, is because it's going to be Stifler from American Pie or similar iterations. He's not that. He's the straight-laced one. He's the one who's not cracking jokes. I mean, there are points where he does crack jokes, but he's not cracking jokes. You've then got Sarah Michelle Gellar, who
badass Buffy the Vampire
yeah,
Slayer
you
cast as a
expect
porn
she's gonna
star.
yeah, you expect her to be the one fighting for kind of like, you know, female empowerment, and is kind of the contradiction of that, and again probably is the point. You've got John Lovitz, who is usually the really wacky one, who, you know, is really really funny, but in like a really wacky and says strange stuff. But he plays like this really straight-laced like cop who just gets his job done, and that's why it's funny, because he's not being what you expect him to be. And it feels like, I know he made the casting choices because he wanted to he wanted to cast against type, but it feels like he's done it to the point where it's so I think with this film you need something that kind of just makes the audience feel at home or feel comfortable. You need something where it's like, well, we know what we're getting from this character because it's this guy or this actress. We know what we're getting from the story because it's that type of film. But everything here, you don't know what you're getting. You don't know at any point what you're kind of getting out of it.
Do you think this is because this is set in another dimension where everything's a bit wonky? You know, like,
Perhaps,
did he think that?
perhaps.
You know, because that's like, you know, there's all that. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but I wonder if he was sort of thinking, oh, that's sort of, it's set in, okay, it's an alternate timeline of the America, isn't it? And maybe in this timeline, you know, The Rock is this guy. Maybe a bit too much of a stretch, but yeah, to cast like Buffy as the porn star character it's all like, even reading the back of this, I was like, what? You know, when I read the back of the book,
and that's
like,
why, you know, usually we try and get the plot in for the listeners, but I don't think that helps in any way, shape or form. You know, the plot that we've got here: in a dystopian near future, Los Angeles reeling from nuclear attacks and under constant government surveillance, a bizarre and apocalyptic conspiracy unfolds. Boxer Santeros, an amnesiac action star, teams up with a psychic porn actress and twin brother duo involved in a rebel movement. As reality begins to unravel, time travel, identity crisis, and a mysterious energy source coverage in a surreal I can never say that word. A surreal satire and chaotic narrative that critiques politics, media, and the end of the world.
Oh yeah,
and just as we're speaking about the plot, we've got that scene.
it's quite mental, isn't it? I'd never even heard about this scene.
It's one of those scenes that I can't believe hasn't been mentioned more, and perhaps it has, and I just haven't.
It feels like it's, you know, a lot of this film as well. Now in 2025, it looks like it's made by AI.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Like ahead of its time, because how they made it look so AI. I've never seen a film look so AI generated that's not.
Yeah,
that was made so long ago.
So that Trier Saltaire advert and there's no kind of way of getting around this. 2 pickup trucks. Fuck. There's no way of saying that any other way that explains what's going on. It's like, this is the sort of thing where I said to Hannah after I watched this, I was like, you know, the film that we're doing for the podcast, you know, she's like, yeah. And I went, I've got no idea. I've literally got no idea. And she's like, oh, what do you mean? I was like, well, put it this way. 2 4x4s, fuck. And she's like, what? And I'm like, exactly. Like, it feels so, I was going to say out of place, but it kind of doesn't feel out of place in this film, because everything is so, every now and again you get something like that where it's just so crazy that you can't quite comprehend what you've just seen. And that is probably the pinnacle of that craziness.
Yeah, I don't want to go out because in case I forget about some other scenes, but I'm pretty sure that's the most. That scene is the one where you go, what? And then you're sort of seeing a whole room of people sort of have the similar reaction.
So the senator even says, you know, something along the lines of, I've just seen two pickup trucks, fuck. And he's like, yeah, you have. He's like, all right, okay. And it's like, that's exactly what the audience are doing. And okay, I feel like that's obviously the intention there. but I don't really know why it has that intention. Like, I can understand it not furthering the plot. I can understand that, but what message is that trying to say? What is the satire there trying to say? Like, and I can't work it out. Like, anything I can probably think of is probably a bit of a stretch and a bit too much of a stretch.
I get the impression that like celebrity and porn and everything is sort of mixing together, and the car, even adverts for cars are sort of really sort of, everything's.
Yeah.
It's this thing of like when we're coming to like an apocalypse, everything starts getting a bit weird. I wonder if that, like, I think like if like tomorrow, like you saw a Skoda advert and two Skodas were banging, I feel like you could be like, I reckon you could predict the nuclear clock could go off in about a year from there. Do you know what I mean? I think like if we get to that point, ask
ironically, if you were to make a film about it, it would be the narrator saying, and you can trace it all back to one moment. And it was the moment that advert released. It just seems, I mean, I think for me, I think that was the point where I kind of started to go, oh, is it going to be one of these films that isn't really trying to answer any of the questions it poses? Like, and I get, obviously naturally comparisons with Donnie Darko because of the director, but another film that springs to mind is a film called Enemy, which I don't think you've probably not seen, but for listeners who have seen it will know that is a pretty kind of open-ended, weird kind of film. But I feel like the difference between that, Donnie Darko, and this is it kind of knows what questions to ask and when to leave the questions unanswered. Here, it's like they just ask all the questions and kind of say, make of that what you will. And actually, there are some questions that we need answering, and there are some questions that can be left up to interpretation. But generally speaking, we need some answers, and we need some rules in this world. And there doesn't feel like there are any rules. And because of that, it's like, well, I don't know. Not that I should be able to predict what's happening next in the film, but that you should be able to use that as a filmmaker to your advantage, because you can go, okay, this is what the audience are going to expect, so therefore I'm going to do something different because it will, subvert expectations and whatnot. Whereas here, within 5 or 10 minutes, I was very, very, very confident that I was not going to be able to know where the fuck this film was going. And not in a good way. Not in the way of an Enemy or a Donnie Darko, where you go, okay, well, I don't really know what the director is actively telling me, but I have a pretty clear interpretation of this question because of what I've been given. Whereas here, it's like, no idea.
Don't even know what to ask.
Yeah, I can't even answer the questions because I don't know what questions to bloody ask.
The fluid karma is a whole other like plot device in this. Like it's throughout this whole movie, there's this fluid karma stuff that I think people are taking as a drug at this point, and it's sort of becoming more used in this world. And I can't really. Have you got a description of it anywhere, Ryan? Fluid karma. Is it? I think it affects the karma of other people and time, and people are taking it, and it's making people go a bit wild. But I actually don't have a clue about what it even is now, right this minute.
And as I say,
is it a bit like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles sludge? Power Rangers sludge.
With a quick Google search.
Okay.
So, fluid karma is a fictional perpetual energy generator and drug developed by a German company, Trier.
Okay.
So immediately I'm a little bit clearer on what fluid karma is.
Yeah, they're using it in the power of the world.
Trier utilises a compound encircling the planet to create both the energy source and the drug. The drug, initially tested on US military personnel in Iraq, grants users psychic abilities and telepathy. It essentially is a substance that unlocks psychic potential and facilitates a form of communication beyond normal means.
Oh my God. I don't know if I'm just a bit sleepy.
And ironically, the only that is through Google's AI overview. So that tells you everything you need to know. The only way to understand this film is through the use of artificial intelligence.
So they were testing fluid karma on the people in Iraq. So that would have included Justin Timberlake, and that would explain why he is like still maybe present in the world even though he's dead.
Yeah,
because he. When you get telepathy, he's like communicating.
I'll be honest. When you were saying earlier that he was killed by Sean William Scott, obviously for the sake of the podcast I'm trying to maintain a level of I understood that, but in my head I'm going, what are you telling me right now? Like, it just,
I think that's what happened.
I mean, it probably is what happened, but I'll be the first to, as anybody will know listening to this episode, I have virtually no understanding of this film, and I'd like to think that I'm pretty good with trying to pick up on sub themes and subtext and metaphor and all of these things in films. You know, I'm usually the one having to explain films to Hannah after we've watched them and go, oh well, this is what this means, and you're not necessarily supposed. But here, I feel like I needed that alongside me, and I needed to pause it every 10 minutes and go, right, can you just explain to me what I've just said?
Well, Justin Timberlake is the reason why you would not necessarily see that, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, but Justin Timberlake is in this movie. He's not like a ghost, like he's in this sitting on a turret, sort of narrating everything. But I'm pretty certain he is. The first thing at the beginning, it says he was blown up by a grenade. It was friendly fire, and then at the end, Sean William Scott, he said that was friendly fire. He's like, look, I know, I forgive you, or whatever, and he forgives himself. Very powerful, and I kind of get the subtext with the war stuff, and that's the stuff I really like about this film, is that where it's talking about like the testing of this new power energy source on soldiers in Iraq. It's like that's the sort of thing that these sort of governments would do. Like, in Vietnam, lots of people are on, lots of soldiers on drugs, and it's very cheap and to get hold of stuff. And I think they were giving it to them. So I get all these sort of, and it obviously messed up all these soldiers. And I think, there's a lot of, and part of me thinks this film is sort of saying that, this idea of forgiveness, like, if it's post 9/11, I think it's sort of saying, what are we getting by going into these countries when, this isn't my view, by the way, this is what I think the one of the questions is, like, what are we getting by going, even though we've been, massive attack has been on our country, like, what are we getting from these perpetual wars and stuff? And I think, like, The Rock represents the sort of people that keep these systems up and going. You know what I mean? Until they have like and at the end he's like they say, oh, he has to die, and I might be wrong, but I have a feeling he might have to die because for this system to come to an end, it's people like him that are keeping it up. Like, maybe people with the right intentions, but not necessarily doing the right thing.
Not able to understand that they're part of the problem or the systemic issues, or
until they go through the fourth dimension and have some sort of cosmic awakening.
I do just feel though it could have done a much better job of telling any one of these plots.
Yeah, great.
Because there are two, like, obviously you've got that plot in there. You've got the plot of, the blackmail. I mean, the scene where you've got the blackmailers, John Lovitz, and for the life of me, all I can remember is she's called Gail in Scary Movie, and she's one who gets with Dewey in Scary Movie. But when he says to her, do you want to fuck or do you want to watch a movie? And she's like, I want to watch a fucking movie. It's like, those things are really, really funny. And it is a really, really funny film, but it's not a comedy. And it feels like it's trying to not be a comedy despite it being really, really funny. And it at no point does it just commit to something. And that seems crazy to say, considering they've obviously committed to making this massive film and this really long film. But if they commit to any one of the plots that they bring up and focus on that plot and just make that plot a little bit stronger, it becomes, in my eyes, an instantly better film. Like, I feel like you could tell the story of what you were saying earlier of Sean William Scott's character, forgiving himself. You could tell that story throughout, the whole film, and that be the sole focus. You could do the sole focus of, Boxer Santeros's character being the sole focus. But it's like trying to put them all in the same thing. It's like, it feels like season 1, season 2, season 3 of
3 movies
of Black Mirror. Yeah,
you're right. And maybe this is at a time where he should, nowadays he would just make the series. You know what I mean? Maybe it's
I feel like it would be much better suited to a series, because there is that thing sometimes of knowing when something should be a series, or know what medium to tell your story in. Because a film is obviously, I mean, you can make 4-hour, 5-hour films, but they're not gonna sell. But knowing, okay, I have a coherent story or a cohesive story that I can tell in an hour and a half or 2 hours, okay. But here it's like you have these big grandiose plans. It should have been a TV series.
You know what, as well, I've seen a lot of bad movies, what one of those marks. Well, I don't know. I don't need those marks. I've seen a lot of films sort of rubbish ones like Cowboys and Aliens. Then looking back, I probably listened back to that episode, probably gave that like high number because I was like, you're feeling good about it. But no, I do actually think that's rubbish. But the thing is, Cowboys and Aliens, if you said all that cast, they're doing a series called Cowboys and Aliens, they're going to explore those aliens a bit more, I'd be like, no thanks. Actually, I've had enough of that. That's 1 hour and a half. I ain't going to get. Maybe I'll see the film again one day, but Cowboys and Aliens, I ain't going to watch a series of that. But this, we would both watch this, wouldn't we?
I think we would, because there is an, as anybody can have picked up on, or who has seen, there's an awful lot going on here, and we're talking about this in long form, but essentially our review of it is that it's got too much going on. There's too many stories, there's too many plots, there's too many characters, there's too much of everything. And actually knowing when to include a character, knowing when to take a character out, because we hear about it all the time about people being cast in movies and then their characters being totally cut from the film, because actually we don't need that in there. And it's a bit of a pain for that person who's in that film who wants to, be a part of that film, but it's better for the overall outcome of the film, but actually here it's like and Richard Kelly did say that he allowed a lot of the cast, because a lot of the cast are, like The Rock, who's obviously comes from wrestling, so he's quite used to kind of like coming up with things on the fly in terms of improv. You've got a load of people who've been in SNL or have been hosts of SNL, so that they can do a lot of improv, and I feel like he kind of let them go a little bit too far in places because they've lost what the actual scene's about. And so it's very funny because you've got those comedy giants in there, but actually they've lost the film almost.
I think you're right there. It feels like, so I often think with art and music and probably film is that you like there's an idea and you have to dig it out of the ground, or whatever analogy you use. Like Oasis say, like you go fishing, but the inspiration, there's this thing and you try and dig it out. But I feel like when you're digging out the idea and inspiration, you're at that point a bit of an art, a sort of, you're trying. You can use different tools to dig it out. You can use spades and toothbrushes and stuff to scrape off the dirt for this artifact that you're delivering, this movie or a song or whatever. And I feel like it feels like with this one, they dug it out and then they stuck a load of little ornaments to it. They like sort of started painting it because it feels like there's all. You're right. I think it has actually, as much as I'm going to watch this again and probably the longer version because I'm just fascinated with it. Because I think it's all done quite well, like you say, but in doing it well, I feel like there is maybe something clearer that we've lost. And you can say for all you like, is it all the time stuff that's making this movie dreamlike and weird, and is it kind of all explainable? Yeah, maybe, but would I prefer it if it was a little bit more palatable? Probably. Like,
I think that's the thing. I think it's forgotten it's a movie. Like, there was an element of going, did I enjoy watching this movie? And the ultimate answer is no, I didn't enjoy it. There were things that I thought were funny about it. There was things that I liked about it. But the overall experience, I didn't enjoy it. And that's kind of the point of a movie. But I understand, yep, you can ask your political questions and ask your deeper themes and all of these things. But ultimately, it's a movie. You're not making a documentary. You're not trying to necessarily, convince people of one thing or the other. It's a movie. People go to the movies to enjoy themselves. And actually, it's kind of lost that a little bit. I think, going back to the improv stuff, I think, improv is a great way of coming up with ideas. But at some point, particularly in a film like this, there needs to be somebody going, okay, the scene, at the very least, we need Boxer Santeros to do this. We need him to do this or say this in this kind of way. But actually, it feels like they've just been going, yeah, do what you like and we'll film it. And that can be great for comedy. But actually, this is a film that the comedy is kind of, ironically, like everything else, is kind of like this thing over here that is great, but doesn't really do anything else for the rest of it. And you do need
It doesn't really have to be funny, this film, as well. Like,
it doesn't.
It doesn't really need to.
And I'll be honest, if it wasn't funny, I definitely would hate it.
Okay, maybe it does have to be funny.
For me, anyway, this film has to be funny.
Yeah. The
film they were trying to make doesn't, if that makes sense. I feel like if this film wasn't funny and, The Rock wasn't doing his twiddly fingers thing and looking really kind of like goofy in places, if you didn't have, though, Deep Throat 2 being quite, a parody of those, those blackmailers in those 90s thrillers, if it didn't have that, then this really would have a lot less going for it in my eyes. But the film they were trying to make, this post-apocalyptic dystopian future where these things are happening and all of these questions are being asked, that doesn't have to be funny. A film I'm thinking of, which is totally different from this in some ways, but some ways in terms of like its theme, not its themes, but the way it approaches storytelling, is a film called Dark City from the 90s. That film isn't funny and doesn't need to be funny because the way it tells its story and the way it tells its rule, builds its world is good enough to keep you hooked and good enough to keep you entertained, have you ask questions, but still understand the parameters of the world you're in. Whereas here, it's kind of, it feels very much like a situation where they've thrown so much shit at the wall. Some of it's stuck, some of it hasn't. Some of it has kind of gone down this road that nobody was really expecting. And so as a result, it's not fulfilled. It's not in any way, shape or form, realised to its full potential. It's just there. Everything is just kind of there on screen.
There it is. You work it out. I actually worked out something wrong as well, so I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to just say he's not dead, Justin Timberlake. He's wounded, and it's only because we've got it in the background now. And I was like, no, it doesn't make sense. And it had a news article, and he was like deeply wounded, and now I think he's sort of he's in the news coming out about they're using telepathy in the war and stuff. So he was wounded, but I think Sean William Scott was
the one who wounded him.
Yes, sorry. So. But see, look, there you go. I got it totally wrong.
That's kind of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
The problem is that you've managed to get that interpretation, not because the film is open to that interpretation, but because the way it tells that story isn't clear.
Yeah,
that's the biggest takeaway, isn't it? The things that we're supposed to interpret and come up with on our own are there, but we need the anchor of, here are the things that are set, here are the things that are fixed. This is what we are presenting to you, and here's all the other stuff that you can go away and think about and come up with on your own merit and with your own interpretations. everything else needs to be set. And there's so much here that doesn't feel set, that doesn't feel, going back to what I said earlier, there are no rules in this, and not in this time there are no rules, in that kind of movie, way of depicting things. Here, there are no rules, meaning that anything is up for grabs. So when you explained that earlier, it blew my mind, but was totally plausible.
He's not dead. But I think part of that is the movie. But I have to take some responsibility for watching the first sort of third of the movie. I was tired in bed, and I was like, "Oh, he's dead. Oh, he's dead then, is he?"
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we did both watch this late at night when we were probably a little bit too tired to be watching it.
I think it's one of those ones. Then again, when else would you watch this? I think it is the one to watch by yourself.
Well, I think to give this movie the best possible chance, I think you need to prepare for it. Now, I'm not saying you need to do some like Rocky style training, but you need to set aside some time for it and not be on your phone, not have other distractions, and just sit and watch it. I feel like this would have been a film perfect to watch in the cinema because you don't have any of those other distractions. Ideally, if you go to the right sort of cinema.
God knows what I would have made of this in the cinema.
But I feel like that is the best place to kind of give it its best chance. I'm not saying it would make it a better experience and it would make it a better film, but I feel like if you watch this when, you're on your phone or you've got a limited amount of time, or you're pausing it and going and doing the washing or whatever it may be, I think it's an uphill battle at that point.
It was one of those films where I just watched it. I was like, whoa, I was quite moved by the ending, and then I went quickly online and was like, what the hell? Just to find some other people that have written stuff that also going, what the hell? And I was like, thank God. I thought I'm an idiot. Am I an idiot? No. It's that this film is mental, and
that's kind of the thing with films, is that a bit like with music and any kind of art form really, is whilst they're incredibly collective, they're also incredibly personal as well. And so sometimes that can be a great thing, that you can come away from a film thinking, what have I just watched? I don't understand that in the slightest. But when you feel the need to have to go and Google what happened at the end of a film, I often think that that's not a great thing.
I don't know.
I feel
go on.
Because I feel like films that ask questions and are open to interpretation, it's quite obvious. And you're usually, when a film has done that well, you're quite confident of your interpretation, and you're quite confident that that's okay, that may differ from somebody else.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's so crazy, it's so off the wall. You just want to know what other people think because you don't know what to think.
It's like if you actually watched the cutscenes in Hideo Kojima. Like there's certain bits of this movie that feels like that's a video game sort of developer that made arguably some of the most groundbreaking video games in Metal Gear Solid, and they all have really good gameplay, and they're all like stealthy, and there's some really amazing music in it. But as they went on, they became more bloated with sort of weird, nonsensical storyline that you have to watch like a 3-hour YouTube video that someone's like spent 20 years trying to work out.
Yeah.
And this is like that, and a lot of it feels like that.
And the only thing that this doesn't have is the gameplay where you keep coming back.
Well, I would say those moments are like some of the clearer moments. Like some of the bits where it's like quite obvious what's happening. There's like, oh, someone slept with someone else, or but there are just some bits where and within everything else, I just think, God, this just didn't make like it didn't need to be there. Like you could cut out the whole of the Justin Timberlake song, but you're losing a bit of how he feels. But I don't necessarily know if you need it. But at the same time, it's such a great bit.
You 100% do not need that in the slightest. I think this is the point of the film where I really started to lose me totally, because and it's not because it isn't a great scene, because in isolation it feels like a Justin Timberlake music video.
Yeah,
and if he was to release that song as or sorry, I know it's the
Could
Killer's
just
song.
released it off.
If he released that as a music video,
Yeah.
people would be saying that's one of the greatest music videos ever made.
Yeah. Do you remember?
And
the one where he's covered in
objectively,
blood? Yeah.
in isolation, it's great. It's fantastic. But why is it there?
Yeah.
Why is it there?
But I feel like we're talking about a dream, Ryan. I feel like that Reddit comment, like, like, why did I have that dream last night about that thing? Like, what, like, why does it make you, I'm not saying that makes this good or whatever, but it is that thing of it makes sense in its own world, but it doesn't necessarily make sense in it out of when you turn it off, because you're like, I don't know. I was kind of following it. Like, I was following it all. And then afterward, we're filming. It's like, God, do you remember that bit where Justin Timberlake was in my dream? It's like,
I feel like that would have been fine if, again, it had made it clear that that was the intention it was going for. I think it's all about intentions here. I can't tell you what the director, the writer, Richard Kelly, was trying to tell me here. What was he going for? What was he trying to achieve here? I can't tell you that. And I feel like that's the problem. When you have films that are like this and are open to interpretation, the thing that usually grounds you and keeps you on the right path, albeit you can take your own, you can go down the first fork in the road or you can go down the next one, but you're on the right path, is what the director or the writer is trying to get you to do, or trying to make you feel, or trying to ask the question. You know those things. But here, in that same analogy, it feels like you put the film on and you start on the path and you get halfway down the road and then you're abducted by aliens. That's how it feels. It feels very much like...
That sounds like Cowboys and Aliens.
It does. But that's how it feels watching it, because you feel like you've just been... there just doesn't seem to be any kind of clear direction. And sometimes in the film's defense, it's too clear. It's too much. Like, the thing that I hate more than anything is when I'm told so clearly what I need to feel when I'm watching something. That's the thing that I hate not hate the most, but it's one of the things I hate in films. Usually it's, somebody's just died or somebody's done something horrific and they play this mournful music over the top. And it's like, I know what you want me to feel there. You're telling me, you're telegraphing it, you're so obvious in it. I've now disconnected. But I feel like this is the polar opposite of that, in the sense of I'm so unclear, I've now become disconnected. And I feel like there is a a middle ground that you should kind of try and stick to. Not always be in the middle, but try and not be all the way to the right or all the way to the left. Be somewhat, in that middle third. And I just can't at any point give you any kind of real confident answer as to Richard Kelly, the director and writer, when he was writing this scene. He's writing this because...
I reckon he had an idea, they filmed it, and it was really hard to make it make sense, I think. And I realised... What I would say about this is the story... like if you were... I was watching this video the other day about the making of that new Bob Dylan movie, and he was like, he likes to, like they have some things in focus and then the rest is all blurred out of the background.
Yeah.
And he in that movie, the Bob Dylan one, he said, well, all of the set directors gone so out of their way to make everything so original, like even flyers on the street a lot of that time, they've gone so far out of their way, and so he keeps it all it's all in focus and stuff, and pretty much most of the movie. And so if you can like sit and watch that movie and just look around, like not even do what the characters doing, look around and do it, see what they're doing. And this movie's, just earlier, it was just on the background. Sarah Michelle Gellar was in a room, like it's not even a very important scene. It's just in a room, and it's like covered in graffiti. There was a blow up doll with like a neon thing in its mouth. At one point,
and blow up sex doll with a.
And it was like it's so much detail in it.
There is,
and it's like, it's quite mental.
And I think
gone such an effort.
I think that's the film's problem. Is when I said earlier about the way they were talking about this film without ever kind of being able to kind of realize or pick up on the fact of why this film doesn't work. They almost get to it when he says that the way he kind of writes is he basically says that because I think Richard Kelly's dad used to work for NASA, and his dad used a phrase of a scope creep. And basically, or I think that's the phrase, but basically it's when the scope of a project or a film slowly creeps out. So you start off with this really sort of concise, coherent idea, and slowly over time it gets bigger and it gets bigger and it gets bigger and it gets bigger. And I feel like he's like so clearly nailed on the problem of this film without really realizing that's the problem of the film. Like, he kind of almost does that as a way of saying how, you know, this world is so great that he's not that he's created, because he's not arrogant in the way he says it, but it's never like he manages to realize that the reason why this film doesn't work is because we always say on the podcast, and you know, we always say that studio interference can sometimes ruin a film. You know, Alien 3, prime example. Studio got interfered and they, you know, didn't let people do what they're good at. Here, we needed studio interference. We needed somebody to say, that's a great idea, but that's not the film we're making. You know, we need to keep it within this budget. We need to keep it within this scope. And nobody kind of done that. They kind of just left him get on to his own devices. And whilst that may have been good for Donnie Darko, it hasn't been very good here in terms of the overall coherence of the plot.
And for the longevity of like this project, you could have had a really coherent story in this world, and then we would have all wanted to come back to it. You could have had quite a successful film potentially. I feel like it's a bit like the scope creep thing. You know, it's like a snowball, and it keep rolling the snowball, and then it gets so big, and then but that sort of, you know, like George R. R. Martin with Game of Thrones, like you know, there's all this talk online. It's been quite a long time. He might have a writer's block or whatever, but there's people.
I'll be honest, I don't think that book is ever coming out.
Yeah, but you think that, you know, he started with the idea of you know, a few brothers, they all find these wolves in their creek or whatever, you know, and it's the dire wolves. And that's the first. That was his first initial idea, and then he kept moving. He kept rolling the snowball. It got bigger and bigger and bigger, and he goes, you know, it just branched out. But now there's people talking online. You know, he might land it or whatever. You know, but he might, but maybe it is just too big, and it's really hard to wrap it all up. And you know, even in his lifetime or whatever. And you know, there's a lot in this, and it. You know, in some movies, things all sort of, you get a lot of branching. I don't really like films that much. I like Snatch, right? But I don't like too many of those films. Like, I don't like it when you got all these characters and then they all meet and then it all resolves quick. Well, I'm glad it didn't do that, but it feels like it kind of does. It has one of those moments, which is a slight thing that I don't like that much.
I think that, to be fair, is kind of what it needed. It's funny you should mention Snatch, or you know, or Lock, Stock, or those Guy Ritchie movies, because I was going to say earlier, what they have is they do have lots of different characters who are, you know, very, very, very big characters in their own right. But they do have that point where they all cross over and they all start to go into the same plot. It's a branch, but it all leads back to the same tree. This doesn't. These are all branches that have fallen off the tree and are no longer connected to it, in my eyes.
They do kind of like, at the end, there's a scene I was referencing where the milk truck bashes into they rob an ATM and they want to go to Mexico. Like you say, that's fallen off the wagon at that point. And they're going to Mexico for some reason. He you know, the milk truck hits that thing, and then the sort of some of the sort of stories they all line up in a way again towards the end, but it's not in a oh god. I totally forgot about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson drinking like 6 cans of like is he drinking that like
Bud
the
Light.
Energy drink?
No, is it Bud Light?
Oh, is it actually? Yeah. To be fair, Ryan, a lot of the scenes, to be honest, the scenes with the what you call neo-Marxists, I think they were acted really well and done well, but I'm actually not as into that. I know it's a lot of the film as well, but I think what it's kind of saying is even like revolutionary, even the people that rebel against, the big bad, like the state, like their intentions aren't always that much better anyway. And I get that some of those themes are there, and that's kind of cool. But I'm actually slightly disinterested with like the neo-Marxist movement on that basis. I don't know if you felt that.
And I wonder how much of that becomes part of the problem is that, let's say in the writer's room or in, when they were workshopping this in however they wanted to do it, they realised that actually if they gave any one of these storylines the focus, either they weren't able to give it, the kind, they weren't able to make it interesting, so they just went, well, let's just have them all in there then. It feels like that, where they went, is that interesting enough on its own? Do we need something else? Yeah, we need something else. And then they got this other story, and I went, is that interesting enough on its own, or do we need something? Oh no, we need something else. And I think if they had have focused on it, would they have been able to make that interesting? I don't know. I wonder how much of it is the old, what I call the old student philosophy approach, where they go, let's just do some crazy shit, and it's okay because we're experimenting, because we're students. Feels again a little bit like that, and they're not students; they're accomplished filmmakers. But that approach feels like it's been taken, where you go, you know what? Let's just do that. Let's see what that does. Sometimes that can work, but here in this case, I don't think it has worked.
Do you think that I was just on that scene? I want to suck your dick to The Rock, and then it's like I wonder if that was improvised. Maybe his reaction to her saying that is absolutely.
It feels like an improvised scene, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And again, it's quite funny. To be fair, it's played for laughs.
It's better than all jokes in new movies. Like not across the board, but generally, if you get that now, it would be a bit.
That's the thing. They're not jokes, are they? They're just things that are said that happen to be funny.
Yeah.
There's no like gags or anything like that.
Which I like that about.
Yeah.
I think we defo agree on that. Christina said, "I'm seeing it now, and I think it's just because of where it's a sunny." I don't know if it's the same. Is Romeo and Juliet set that new remake? Is it kind of in LA?
When you say new remake, do you mean, yeah, it's like 26 years old now, mate.
Well, Christina said when this was on in the background,
the Baz Luhrmann one is what you mean.
She said, "This feels a bit like the Romeo and Juliet film." I was like, "Yeah, you're right there. It does. Well,
it has that kind of sun-kissed, kind of scorched, kind of saturation to it, doesn't it?
And a sort of stylized sort of. God. It is there's part of this movie that some of the extras, they never really look like they're in a dystopia or like an alternative future.
And I think that's kind of what I mean, where it's kind of neither one thing or the other. Like it's not to the point where it's like absolutely, really bleak kind of stuff like Children of Men or RoboCop. But it's not this other thing of being like, everything's smiley, because that's the impression we want to give off. But scratch at the surface, you see there's a lot more sinister. It feels like they've kind of come up with this dystopian world and haven't really thought about the people in it. The actual people in it. Obviously, you've got the characters, but the people who are just in the bar or on the beach.
What? It really does feel like the extras in this. I know it's a weird thing to say, but it does feel like they're NPCs in a game.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of how you can link that to the plot, right? Just to save it for the movie. I'm trying to think like, but it's all like, it's all like, are they not drinking that drink? I don't know, but and maybe there's an explanation somewhere, but I didn't see it. But it does feel like a video game free for all world sandbox.
Yeah. One thing I did think was just generally bad and quite stupid in terms of decision making. So it's that scene where they go into the beach kind of bar, and then John Lovitz's character gets shot by the surveillance guy. So we're in this government surveillance state that can track you wherever you go, and for some reason can't find Boxer Santeros, the most inconspicuous man in the world. But they also decide to have these massive rifles that can only load one bullet at a time. Like, it just seems so ridiculously stupid. Like, the only reason they've done that is to give you a reason why they can't just shoot the people they need to get to quickly. And that's when, again, the decision making, I go, in that instance, that is just a stupid decision. Like,
yeah, I
you know what I
agree with
mean?
you.
Like, we're supposed to believe that we've got this world where this massive Zeppelin can come out of this building next to the Staples Centre, but you can't get a massive rifle on a turret with more than one bullet in at a time.
Oh,
you
God,
know,
the scene where someone's just vomiting and then she like goes to vomit, she like sort of cracks up. It's good,
Yeah.
but it's
I mean,
also, it just, I don't quite
and-
know what's
and
happening.
that, you know, that's Miranda Richardson.
Well, she's great.
Yeah, she's great, but also, it's such a weird cast because it's Miranda Richardson, who's a really kind of well-known, established actress.
Christina said, "Why
And-
is she dressed up as like a wizard? You know, like
Yeah.
why? Like the outfit there, it's all just a bit."
And then we get The Rock with his twiddly fingers again.
Yeah,
And-
which is explained, which I like that you got that right.
Yeah, I
With
think
when
I
he
think
goes
it's-
through the other dimension,
yeah.
he comes out and he's just. I kind of think that might be a trauma from what he's experienced.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is good about this film from The Rock's point of view is, I've realised I'm about to say this when it's probably the only time he's doing The Rock stuff where he's looking like The Rock, you know, shirt off, smouldering look. I feel like let's say this film was made today, or, you know, when The Rock was in his height as a movie star. I think he's dropped off a little bit now, but let's say it was made today, you would have that in virtually every scene. You know, The Rock would make it to the point where he's got to be the hero. He's got to look like the movie star. And I like the fact that because it was in 2006, 2007, where The Rock hadn't really found his feet, you haven't got any of that. You don't really have the ego of The Rock, the movie star. You've got, this is a guy who's made his name in something else, but now he's trying something and he's giving it a go. I'm not saying it's the greatest performance. I think, ironically, if you were to put another wrestler in here, and Dave Bautista, who is a fantastic actor, I think it becomes a far better, you know, character, because I think Dave Bautista is 10 times the actor that The Rock is. Not to say that The Rock's performance is bad, but I think in casting The Rock, you're kind of limited, or you certainly were limited at the time as to what you're going to get. And because of the grandiose themes and the general kind of weight that the narrative has, even if done well, you need somebody who can carry that. And he wasn't that person yet. So, whilst admirable to cast him against type, I don't think it done the film any favours in the long run.
No, but I've enjoyed watching it with him in. I
Yeah,
think he's good.
and
yeah.
that's what I would say. It's not that he's bad in it. It's not that he's not enjoyable to watch in it. But I feel like you need somebody who kind of understands how to bring material to screen. Like, he's very good at doing the, you know, he obviously at that time he was very good at doing what he was known for in wrestling, and, you know, being funny and being charismatic, and he is that here. But he wasn't, you know, there are some actors who know how to bring stuff to life, and I think it needed somebody like that, you know, just to help it again, give it another helping hand, because I think all of these things have fed into why this film kind of doesn't work. You know, all of the things work against it. It was never really given a chance before it got to that point. And that's not any of the filmmakers' fault or problem. It's just, in retrospect, it's easy to pick out those things. But we can see that actually, yeah, this film did need to be promoted. And actually, the fact that it came out of the writer's strike was really bad luck. Yeah, the film perhaps did need somebody of a a far more experienced actor in one of its lead roles, perhaps it did need that. Perhaps it did need to be cut down. Perhaps it did need to focus on one plot line. All of these things were probably in isolation really good ideas, but when you put them all together, all of those ideas get lost.
I think as well, this film might be received better if it just came out now, because it's, it very much has its this is the world, this is everything. It doesn't necessarily align with either political side, not the sort of, not, it sort of tries to give you a non-biased way of looking at it. Here's the people in power, here's the opposition, neither of them are any good. And here's all this war stuff. And I feel like, I hate, maybe it's a bit of one of those throwaway comments, but it feels a bit ahead of its time in a way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It is a film that the timing of its release is not only for the reasons I've said, but in terms of what audiences we're used to and what audiences come to enjoy, it was probably, too ahead of its time. There are certain films that sometimes are that, and actually now it's probably is going to start to gain cult status. I mean, the fact that Arrow Video have released a version kind of suggests it's getting to that point anyway.
Also, in general, maybe some of the weird, even though some of the CGI now looks like AI, I didn't really watch. I wasn't really sucked out of the world at any point. I know we spoke about a lot of the extras in this, NPCs. That's what gives it sort of. You know why that is as well, maybe, Ryan? It's just because some of the actors are so bloody famous. What I mean? They don't blend in with the people around them in the background. And but I feel like with this. Oh, what was I saying? Oh, damn! What was I saying? Right? Damn!
Well, whilst you try and think of that, sort of what I was saying. Just to further that point and what you've said, the fact you've got The Rock in there is kind of a problem because it's The Rock. He's you can't get away from who he is. Whereas if you put in, say, a character actor that I can think of, English guy called Eddie Marsan, who never is usually the lead role, but he always plays those characters in the films on the periphery and is able to be effortlessly believable in pretty much anything, whilst he's not going to sell the film because he's not a big star. But if you put a character like that in, it becomes more believable because it's not distracting. As you say, they're all big stars. You've got Buffy, you've got The Rock, who at any point you're kind of expecting them to do the people's eyebrow. You've got really distracting people in there. And sometimes that can be to the film's benefit, but here it just kind of isn't. And what you were saying about it being a film that was ahead of its time, I mentioned and kind of briefly touched upon earlier about things that it's kind of accidentally kind of predicted. Well, obviously, surveillance state. So in kind of increasing times, that's become more and more of a kind of thing, which at that time was oh God, that's never going to happen, but was a worry kind of in a post 9/11 world. Obviously, celebrity-driven politics, we've got people like Trump in office now. There's actually even talk of potentially The Rock running for office.
Well, there you go.
And those kinds of people going for politics, energy crisis, which obviously probably was a thing then, but it's definitely come to the forefront now. And the biggest one is disinformation and fake news. That has been in the past sort of 5-6 years. That has been one of the biggest things is this whole fake news thing. And this is a film that I thought that ironically feels like it's filled with fake news, and part of the problem is you don't really know what bits are true and what bits to kind of latch onto.
And what I was saying as well, Ryan, I have remembered, is that I wasn't pulled out at any point by special effects or anything. And I think sometimes it does skyscraper shots and they're just a normal city. And I think in this world, it feels like it's going quite futuristic and maybe it looks too of the time. But at the same time, it also means that you're not sucked out of the world. You're like, oh, that special effect is rubbish. Like that, it's very Donnie Darko-y when when it glows and they touch hands. The scene where the lady with the sort of fringe and the toe on her back when she's walking through that party is so cool. Like,
it's the classic Goodfellas scene, isn't it? It's, going into an area and seeing this whole host of characters all in one shot. It's a very pleasing, and that's what I mean about the filmmaking here. We've obviously slated this film, or I've slated this film an awful lot, but it doesn't mean it's not a well-made film. I think it's a badly written film, but it's not a badly made film.
That's what makes it like kind of fascinating, is that it's done well, but the films that normally look like this and have performances like this, you're normally like, oh, that was good, wasn't it? But this one, you're like, God, I really don't know what to make of it, and I don't think it. Yeah, I mean,
and then you get films that are written well but look terrible.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
And actually, it's not very often you get films that look amazing and look great.
Especially from this time, there was a lot of special effects used at this time. A lot of films from neighbouring movies around this time would now look rubbish, and like so, it does say something about it.
I think in one respect, because I'm not saying the CGI looks great here.
No. But it's used on like adverts.
The look of it feeds into the story, so it works.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It's it has that kind of future-proof kind of aspect to it. Whereas I think in most films, it's obviously we want this to look realistic.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look realistic because it's CGI and it's terrible. You haven't got the budget for it. Ironically, this is a film where he said, this had a $17 million budget and it needed to have at least 3 times that.
So, Clint Eastwood's last words of Magnaforce 2 is, a man's got to know his limits. They're not The Rock's last words in this, but it is quite a line that I was not expecting. I'm not going to commit suicide. I'm a fucking pimp or whatever. Pimps don't commit suicide.
Yeah, by Will Sasso, who's the actor who plays that character. I love Will Sasso because he does some great wrestling impressions. Jesse Ventura is one of his best impressions, but that's a bit of a sidebar. But it's just such a random line, isn't it? It works for his character, but does it work in the whole context of the film? And I think that's what we keep going back to, isn't it? Where things work in isolation in terms of a single scene, but as soon as you kind of go, well, what's just happened before? What's happening after? It feels, as I go back to one of the first things I said in this episode. It feels like a collection of scenes that have just been put together with no kind of real thought or reasoning. And I think that's probably my closing thought more than anything.
Yeah, should we give it a rating?
So, I mean, it's good. As I say, there's a lot of things that I think are objectively really good here. Like the comedy I keep going back to is great. But I think this film for me is probably, I'm going to say 3.5 skulls.
Mm.
And it's going to be very, very difficult for that to change.
Yeah.
Upon second viewing, I don't, I kind of don't want to watch it again, but I kind of feel like I need to. And that's a weird position to be in.
For me, this has sort of changed the way I feel about movies in general. And it's made me question what I'm even rating anymore. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like this is like rating a dream, and it's like, oh, like if you wake up this morning, weirdest dream I've ever had. Like if you wake up and you're like, how would you rate that dream? Like, what would you say? Would you actually give it a number, or would you be like, I don't know if it works like that? For this film, I know it's ridiculous. And a lot of the films we've done are like ones I really love. So I'm like, it's so hard to rate this because it's obviously 11 million out of 10 because it's my favourite film. But this, in the sort of classic sense of movie reviews, it's low. But I don't necessarily think I think this is like listening to David Bowie in the 90s. I'm sure I wouldn't rate those things low because it's David Bowie, but I would probably say that you should listen to them, But
or probably listening to David Bowie when David Bowie first started, because you've never heard anything like it before. You're like, well, what is this?
So I'm gonna
You know.
I am just gonna give it, for the sake of review, I'll give it 5. And I think that's lacking on all the plot stuff. But I would, I secretly want to give it higher, and I'm very conflicted, so I'm sorry.
And as I say, for a film that I've rated so low, I don't think I've ever come away from a film disliking it so much, but having so much in there that I like.
I reckon send this one to space, let the aliens decide. Like if you get those capsules, blast it out to space, and I reckon this one tells more about the human condition than all our favourite ones
the
do.
problem is that I watched Galaxy Quest recently, which is about essentially about a race of aliens who pick up a TV show and think it's real.
Yeah.
And I've just got images of that where they watch this film thinking that this is a historical document.
But life is mental. Like, you go outside now and you can, you still get a subway. Everything's a chain. Every town's the same. There's like famous people in thing that soon that cars will be banging. Probably it's like, and soon a lot of films are just rubbish. Like this one's good, but it still manages to be rubbish. And it's like this one, I think there's some real... It made me actually feel an emotion at the end, which not a lot of movies do. And I'm giving it all that as those 5 points for that one scene.
With it, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's sometimes with movies and with art and anything, you can't help how it makes you feel. You can look at things and go, I know that objectively this is bad or objectively this is good, but I can't help how I feel. We said about The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I know that's a bad film, but it still doesn't stop me enjoying it. And sometimes that's the thing. I think here, it's the opposite, where I know objectively there are things in here that are great. And perhaps this is a good film, but I can't help feeling how I felt when I watch it by going, I don't really want to watch this now. Yeah. I'm not enjoying this. And I think ultimately you have to remember you're a film and people want to enjoy that experience. I
think that's reasonable. Yeah, I get that.
I think that is as much as you can credit its ambition or whatever it may be. Ultimately, if you end up coming out of a film going, I didn't enjoy that, that's kind of the only rating you can give it, you know. So, Southland Tales, that's what we think of it. Do let us know on social media what you think of it. If you think we've missed the plot, missed the point, let us know, because it is a film that I'm really intrigued with, even though I hate it.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I thought the guy was dead the whole way. I thought the character was dead. And they weren't dead. So
I'm still going to defend you because I think there's so much. I think it's a perfectly plausible thing to have interpreted because, as I said before, when you've got virtually no rules in a film, the only thing you're left with is interpretation. And so if you don't want people to interpret things like what you've done, then make it clear that that's not the case. And it isn't really that clear, in all honesty, because why is he narrating it? Why is he a narrator?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense. No. Usually, you get a sense of why somebody's narrating it. Oh, at the end, we find out, the person who's narrating it is actually the person who's done it. Doesn't do that here. So
I guess he's he's on a turret, he's watching. Anyway, Ryan, yeah.
I think the problem is that, ironically, when we started this episode and beforehand, there was an element of going into an episode when we record. Sometimes there's a bit of a fear of, are we going to have enough to talk about?
That's too much.
Here, we could keep going for another 3 or 4 hours. We're not going to do that.
I think it's a good one to watch with your friends. Like, I actually do. I think it's a good one to watch with other blokes.
Yeah,
sadly,
100%.
I think other guys, or I know maybe it's not really that of a masculine movie, but
It's a film where I feel like you need sounding boards in the moment.
Yeah.
I feel like as soon as you watch it on your own, you're kind of left to your own devices and left in your own head, and that's kind of the worst play. As I say, I think you need to give this film as much of a helping hand as you can.
Yeah.
So if you are going to go and watch this, make sure you're ready for it. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Bury Our Bones with Cinema. We really appreciate you joining us as we deep dive into the world of film. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media pages to stay informed. You can find us on YouTube, TikTok and Instagram at Bury Our Bones with Cinema. You've been listening to Jimmy Murphy, Simon Keet and Ryan Etherington. We will see you next time for more cinematic discussions and hidden treasures. Until then, don't forget to keep your bones buried in the world of cinema. And it will be a one-button job. Boom, 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 toom, toom, toom.
I have a terrible tendency to just scroll back and like, you're talking when we're doing it. I still find it slightly distracting.
It's a bit weird, but I think it's a bit weird. But I suppose
maybe if you listen to it back, see if it sounds. I was like, I'm gonna have to stop it because you listen to it back.
Good job I observed that well, wasn't it?